The Arizona sun beat down on my neck as I watched the concrete mixer pour the final section of our new pool. 2 months of planning, 3 weeks of construction, and every penny of my annual bonus had gone into this moment. My kids, Emma and Tyler, pressed their faces against the kitchen window, their excited breath fogging up the glass. "Is it ready yet, Dad?" Tyler called out, his voice muffled through the window. "Almost, buddy. Just a few more days to cure, then we fill it." I shouted back with a thumbs up. I'm Mark Rivers, 38, single dad to 2 amazing kids, and as of 4 months ago, a proud homeowner in the Desert Palm subdivision of Scottsdale. After the divorce, I promised myself I'd build something stable again, a real home, not just an apartment with weekend visits. The job promotion couldn't have come at better timing, and this house, with its decent yard and good school district, felt like the fresh start we all needed. The pool wasn't extravagant by Arizona standards, modest rectangular design, about 12 by 24 feet, with a small decorative fountain and built-in bench seating. Nothing compared to the infinity edges and swim-up bars that dotted the wealthier neighborhoods nearby. But to Emma and Tyler, it might as well have been a water park. After 2 summers of apartment complex pools with strict hours and crowded weekends, this was freedom. "All right, Mr. Rivers," said Carlos, the contractor, wiping sweat from his brow. "We'll be back tomorrow to finish the detail work, but she's looking good. Remember what I said about the curing time?" I nodded, shaking his hand. "Thanks, Carlos. And yes, no water for 7 days, I got it. Kids are already counting down. Got all your permits displayed? HOA approval forms?" Carlos asked, glancing toward the front of the house. "Everything's in order," I confirmed. "Permits in the window, approval came through 3 weeks ago. Fence is regulation height, too." Carlos nodded approvingly. "Smart man. These HOA types can be real sticklers." I didn't think much of his warning at the time. I'd done my homework, filled out every form, paid every fee. The Desert Palms Homeowners Association had already signed off on my plans. What could possibly go wrong? The answer arrived exactly 8 days later, the day after we'd filled the pool. I was unloading groceries when I spotted the envelope tucked into my door frame, crisp white paper with the Desert Palms HOA logo embossed in gold. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Notice of violation. Property, 4587 Saguaro Lane. Owner, Mark Rivers. Violations. Improper pool fencing, Section 8.3. Unauthorized property modification, Section 12.1. Possible fine amount, $2,500. Contact HOA Board President Karen Whitmore within 72 hours to address these violations before fines are assessed. The signature at the bottom was a looping, aggressive scrawl that tore slightly into the paper, "Karen Whitmore, HOA President." My stomach dropped. $2,500? That was nearly half of what I'd set aside for emergencies. I reread the notice 3 times, growing more confused with each pass. I had followed every regulation to the letter. The fence was exactly 60 inches, I'd measured it myself. And as for unauthorized modification, I had the approval form with the HOA stamp right in my files. "Dad?" Emma poked her head around the corner. "Can we swim after dinner?" I looked at my daughter's hopeful face, her hair already pulled back in a swim cap, goggles dangling from her fingers. "Of course, sweetheart," I said, tucking the notice into my pocket. "Let's make dinner first." That night, as the kids splashed in our new pool under the desert sunset, I pulled out the HOA guidelines and every form I'd submitted. Something wasn't adding up, and I had the sinking feeling that our little piece of paradise was already under threat. "Oh, you got the Whitmore welcome wagon, huh?" My next-door neighbor, Lisa Chen, leaned over our shared fence the following morning. She'd spotted me measuring the pool fence for the third time, tape measure stretched between my hands. "Is that what you call it?" I asked, jotting down the measurement again, 60 inches exactly. Regulation height, just as the guidelines required. Lisa snorted. Karens hit everyone on this block at least once. My crime was wind chimes. Apparently, they were audibly disruptive to the community aesthetic. Whatever that means. Over the next few days, I heard similar stories from nearly every neighbor. Doug Millerson across the street had been fined for leaving his trash cans out 12 hours after collection. The Patels at the corner had received a warning about excessive floral colors in their garden beds. One elderly couple had been threatened with legal action over a bird feeder. Karen Whitmore is what happens when someone with no real power gets a tiny bit of authority, explained Doug as we stood in his driveway. She's been the HOA president for 6 years because nobody wants to run against her. Meeting nights are her personal Broadway show. I had called the number on the violation notice and left 3 messages, each more detailed than the last, explaining that I had all the necessary approvals. On the 4th day, as I was returning from dropping the kids at school, I finally met the infamous Karen in person. She was inspecting my front yard with a clipboard, a petite woman in her late 50s with an immaculate blonde bob and sunglasses worth more than my monthly car payment. She wore white capri pants, a pale blue polo shirt with the HOA logo, and an expression like she'd caught the scent of something foul. "Excuse me," I called, climbing out of my car. "Are you Karen Whitmore? I've been trying to reach you." Her head snapped up, sunglasses coming down just enough to peer over the rims. "Mr. Rivers, I presume? I see you've ignored our notice." "Actually, I've left 3 messages explaining that I have all the proper permits and HOA approval." "Your fence is insufficient," she interrupted, making a note on her clipboard. "And the noise from your pool pump is disruptive to neighbors." I blinked. The fence is exactly 60 inches, regulation height according to Section 8.3. And the pump is a low decibel model, specifically chosen to be quiet. Karen's lips thinned. "The fence measurement is taken from the exterior grade, not the interior deck. And your filter system is positioned too close to the property line." "That's not what the guidelines say," I replied, trying to keep my voice level. "I've read them thoroughly. I wrote the guidelines, Mr. Rivers. I think I know what they say." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "The board meeting is next Tuesday. You can make your case then, but I wouldn't get your hopes up. We take safety and compliance very seriously at Desert Palms." Before I could respond, she was walking away, her clipboard clutched against her chest like a shield. That afternoon, a second notice appeared in my mailbox, this one citing excessive recreational noise and water overspray concerns. The following day, a third notice, improper chemical storage and aesthetic inconsistency with neighborhood standards. By Friday, I had 5 separate violation notices, each more ridiculous than the last. The total potential fines now exceeded $6,000. My attempts to speak with other board members were politely deflected. "You'll need to address that with Karen," was the common refrain, always accompanied by a sympathetic wince or an apologetic shrug. I found Karen watering her pristine front lawn on Saturday morning, her sprinkler system apparently exempt from the water conservation notices the rest of us received monthly. "Mrs. Whitmore," I began, striding across the street. "I'd like to understand why I'm being targeted with these violations when I've followed every regulation." She turned, water hose in hand, her expression one of practiced offense. "Targeted? I'm simply enforcing the rules that everyone agreed to when they purchased in Desert Palms. If you can't follow the rules, maybe this neighborhood isn't for you." The dismissive wave of her hand made my blood boil, but I kept my composure. "I have followed the rules. I have documentation proving it." "Then I look forward to your presentation at Tuesday's meeting," she replied coolly. Though I should warn you, the board rarely overturns violation notices. It sets a bad precedent. As I walked away, I heard her sprinkler system kick on behind me, the gentle hiss of water hitting perfectly manicured grass, while my own yard remained dry to comply with the HOA's strict watering schedule. Something had to give. I couldn't afford these fines, and I wasn't going to let my kids lose their pool over some power-hungry neighborhood tyrant. Tuesday's meeting was 3 days away, and I needed more than just my approved permits to fight back. Pust. Mark. I was trimming my hedges Sunday morning when Doug's urgent whisper caught my attention. He glanced up and down the street like a man about to share state secrets, then motioned me over to his garage. "You know about Karen's pool, right?" he asked once we were safely inside his garage workshop. "She has a pool?" Doug grinned. "Built 5 years ago. No permits, no inspections. She paid some guy cash to do it under the radar. I only know because my buddy works for the city planning department." "Are you serious?" I asked, the hedge clippers forgotten in my hand. "Dead serious. She lords those rules over everyone else, but her backyard's not exactly up to code." He lowered his voice further. "Tim Garza on the South Block has a drone. He's got footage." By Sunday afternoon, a small resistance had formed in my living room: Doug, Lisa, the Patels, and Tim Garza with his drone footage. We gathered around my kitchen table, spreading out documents and photos like detectives working a case. "Here's her backyard from last summer," Tim said, pulling up images on his tablet. "I was doing roof inspections in the neighborhood, totally legitimate drone usage." The aerial photos showed Karen's backyard clearly: a kidney-shaped pool with no safety fence, a broken gate hanging from one hinge, and what appeared to be a pool pump sitting exposed on bare ground, not even on a concrete pad as required by code. "And look at this," Lisa added, sliding across printed pages from the city's public records portal. I searched property modifications for her address. Nothing for a pool, not ever. "But she must have HOA approval, right?" I asked. "She wouldn't break her own rules." The group exchanged knowing looks. "Karen was already president when she put in the pool," Doug explained. "Word is she just stamped her own approval and never filed with the city to avoid the permit fees and property tax reassessment." I leafed through the city building code for residential pools, highlighting relevant sections. According to this, she's violating at least 6 safety regulations. The fence alone is a major violation. Pools require complete perimeter fencing. The Patels had brought along their own documentation, a history of selective enforcement where similar violations had been punished or forgiven seemingly based on Karen's personal relationships with the homeowners. By Sunday night, my dining room wall looked like something from a crime procedural: printouts of regulations, drone photos with violations circled in red marker, a timeline of Karen's presidency, and testimonials from a dozen neighbors who'd faced her wrath. "The board meeting is Tuesday," I said, standing back to survey our work. "I was just planning to defend my pool, but now..." "Now you've got a nuclear option," Doug finished, a gleam in his eye. Monday morning, I took a personal day from work and drove downtown to the city planning department. 3 hours and several helpful clerks later, I had official confirmation: no permits had ever been filed for a pool at Karen Whitmore's address. I also had copies of all the permits and inspections for my own pool, stamped and certified by the city. That afternoon, I carefully photographed my pool area, documenting the fence height, the secured gate, the properly installed equipment. I printed the HOA guidelines with relevant sections highlighted, and prepared a simple but devastating presentation. As I worked, Tyler came into my home office, watching me organize my binder. "Dad, are we going to lose the pool?" he asked, his voice small. I pulled him into a hug. "No way, buddy. In fact, I think we're about to make sure nobody messes with our pool ever again." The Desert Palms Community Center was more crowded than usual for Tuesday's HOA meeting. Word had spread. Neighbors who normally avoided these monthly sessions had suddenly found the time to attend, filling the metal folding chairs and lining the walls. Karen sat at the center of the board table, flanked by 4 other board members who looked various degrees of bored or uncomfortable. She wore a cream-colored blazer with the HOA pin on the lapel, her expression serene as she called the meeting to order. Before we address individual homeowner concerns, let's review the monthly financial report, she began, shuffling papers importantly. I sat quietly in the 3rd row, my evidence binder on my lap, wading through 40 minutes of budget discussions and landscaping proposals. Around me, neighbors exchanged knowing glances. Doug gave me a subtle thumbs up from across the room. Finally, Karen reached the violations and appeals section of the agenda. We have one appeal tonight, she announced, not bothering to look up from her notes. Mark Rivers, 4587 Saguaro Lane, multiple violations regarding unauthorized pool installation and safety hazards. Mr. Rivers, you have 5 minutes to address the board. I stood, binder in hand, and walked to the podium. Thank you, Mrs. Whitmore. I'd like to distribute copies of my documentation to the board members. I handed each board member a neatly organized folder containing my permits, approval forms, and photographs. Karen accepted hers with narrowed eyes. As you can see, I began, my pool installation was fully permitted by the city. I pointed to the first page. The HOA approval form on page 2 was signed by board member James Wilson on February 18. My fence stands at exactly 60 inches, as shown in the photographs on page 3, meeting the requirements specified in section 8.3 of our guidelines. Karen was already shaking her head. The fence measurement is taken from the exterior grade, not the pool deck, I finished for her. I'm aware of that interpretation, though it's not actually written in our guidelines. That's why my measurements were taken from both positions, as documented on page 4. Either way, the fence exceeds minimum height requirements. One of the board members, a retired gentleman named Frank, was nodding as he flipped through my documentation. As for the noise complaints, I continued, page 5 shows the decibel readings of my pump system, taken at various times of day, all well below the limit set in section 10.2. I methodically addressed each violation, pointing to the evidence that refuted every claim. The board members looked increasingly uncomfortable, except for Karen, whose face had settled into a rigid smile. While researching these guidelines to prepare my defense, I said as I neared my conclusion, I became curious about how other pools in our community are maintained and inspected. Karen's smile faltered. I'd like to direct the board's attention to a separate matter of concern. I pulled out a second set of folders. These documents pertain to a different property in our community, 4732 Desert Bloom Avenue. Karen's address. Her knuckles whitened around her pen. Public records indicate this property has a swimming pool that was never permitted with the city, I continued, my voice steady. Drone photography taken during routine roof inspections shows multiple safety violations, including no perimeter fencing, unsecured access, improperly installed equipment, and potential drainage issues. I displayed the aerial photos on an easel I'd set up beforehand. The room had gone completely silent. According to section 12.4 of our very own HOA guidelines, I said, turning to face Karen directly, all common area and residential water features must comply with city safety codes and permit requirements. The property at 4732 Desert Bloom Avenue is in violation of at least 6 separate safety regulations. This is outrageous, Karen finally sputtered, her voice shrill. You have no right to spy on my property. Her outburst confirmed what the documents only suggested. Several gasps rippled through the audience. Board member Frank cleared his throat. Mrs. Whitmore, is this true? Your pool isn't permitted? This is a personal attack, Karen insisted, gathering her papers. "It's completely inappropriate and has nothing to do with Mr. Rivers' violations." "Actually," said Lisa Chen, standing up from the audience, "it speaks directly to selective enforcement, which violates our HOA charter." Another board member, a younger woman I hadn't met, spoke up. "I think we need to table Mr. Rivers' alleged violations until we can investigate these other concerns. If there are safety issues with any pool in the neighborhood, that takes priority." "I move to dismiss all pending violations against 4587 Saguaro Lane," Frank said firmly. "Second," said the younger woman immediately. Karen looked around wildly, but found no allies. "We can't just." "All in favor?" Frank asked, raising his hand. 3 other board hands went up, leaving Karen alone. "Motion passes," Frank announced. "Mr. Rivers, your violations are dismissed. As for the safety concerns at 4732 Desert Bloom, I move that we report these findings to the city inspector's office immediately, as required by our bylaws." "You can't do this," Karen hissed. "I am the president of this board." "A position that's up for re-election next month," Doug called from the back of the room, followed by scattered applause. The meeting deteriorated from there, with Karen eventually storming out, her cream blazer and blonde bob the last things through the door. The remaining board members voted to create a special committee to review all recent violation notices and to schedule an emergency election for the president's position. As I gathered my materials, neighbors I barely knew came up to congratulate me, share their own Karen stories, and offer handshakes. Frank, the board member who had spoken up, pulled me aside. "That was quite a presentation, Mark," he said quietly. "Between us, we've been looking for a way to check Karen's power for years. Nobody had the guts, or the evidence, to do it." I nodded. "I just wanted to be treated fairly. My kids love that pool." "Well," Frank replied with a smile, "I think it's safe to say your pool is secure. Karen's, on the other hand." He shook his head. "Those safety violations are serious business. The city doesn't mess around with unpermitted pools." I left the community center that night feeling lighter than I had in weeks. The violations against me were gone, and for the first time since moving in, I felt like Desert Palms might actually become the home I'd hoped for. The city inspector's van pulled up to Karen's house at 9:15 the next morning. I wasn't spying, exactly. I was working from home at my front window with a very necessary cup of coffee. 2 officials in khaki uniforms spent nearly 3 hours in her backyard, taking photographs and measurements. By afternoon, the official notice was taped to her front door, a bright orange enforcement declaration visible from the street. News travels fast in Desert Palms. By dinner time, Doug had texted me the details. Karen had been issued a $4,800 fine for the unpermitted pool, plus a compliance order requiring her to bring everything up to code within 60 days or face additional penalties. "They're making her drain it until she installs proper fencing," his text read. "Haven't seen her this mad since the Hendersons painted their door navy blue instead of Desert Palms approved indigo." Karen's response was swift and predictable. The next morning, a terse email went out to all homeowners. From Karen Whitmore. Subject: Resignation from HOA Board. Due to personal health concerns, I am stepping down from my position as president of the Desert Palms Homeowners Association, effective immediately. It has been my pleasure to serve this community for the past 6 years. Sincerely, Karen Whitmore. No one believed the health concerns excuse, of course, but no one challenged it either. The emergency election was held 2 weeks later. Frank won the presidency unopposed, with Lisa Chen stepping in as vice president. Their first official act was to suspend all pending violation notices for 90 days while they reviewed the enforcement policies. Karen's once immaculate yard began to show signs of neglect. Construction equipment appeared, then disappeared without apparent progress. The orange notice remained taped to her door, joined by additional paperwork as the weeks passed. Occasionally, I'd spot her hurrying between her house and car, head down, avoiding eye contact with neighbors. 3 weeks after the fateful HOA meeting, there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find Doug, Lisa, and about a dozen other neighbors on my front step. "Special delivery," Doug announced, holding up a colorful gift bag. "What's this?" I asked, bewildered. Lisa grinned. "Just a little neighborhood appreciation. Can we come in?" They filed into my living room, where Lisa pulled a bottle of champagne from the gift bag, along with several gift cards to local restaurants and pool supply stores. "The neighborhood took up a collection," she explained. "We figured you deserved something for standing up to Hurricane Karen after all these years. Plus," added Doug, "we're hoping you'll host the first official Desert Palms pool party this weekend. Kind of a fresh start celebration." I was touched. "That's incredibly kind, but you don't need to." "We want to," interrupted Mrs. Patel firmly. "My roses can finally be whatever colors they want to be." We all laughed, and just like that, the party was planned. That Saturday, nearly 30 neighbors crowded into my backyard. Kids splashed in the pool while adults mingled around tables laden with potluck dishes. Frank manned the grill, insisting that his burgers were HOA approved, guaranteed. From across the street, I occasionally caught glimpses of Karen watching from her window, her face a pale oval behind the glass. I considered inviting her, a generous peace offering, but before I could debate the idea too long, her curtains snapped shut. "Don't waste your energy," Lisa advised, following my gaze. "Some people choose bitterness." "Besides," Doug added, raising his soda can in a mock toast, "her backyard's all torn up. Contractor told me they found issues with the pool shell itself, might need to be completely rebuilt." As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the pool where Emma and Tyler played Marco Polo with newfound friends, I realized that this was exactly what I'd hoped for when I moved us here: community, laughter, belonging. It had just taken an unexpected battle to find it. 2 months later, Desert Palms had transformed. Under Frank and Lisa's leadership, the HOA focused on community building rather than punitive enforcement. The monthly newsletter changed from a list of violations to announcements of block parties and landscaping tips. Volunteer committees formed to help elderly residents with yard maintenance and to organize a community garden in the previously underused park. Karen's house remained in a state of perpetual construction. The pool, drained and partially demolished, was surrounded by orange safety fencing that Frank ironically noted finally brings it up to code. Rumors circulated that she was selling, though no "for sale" sign appeared. I rarely saw her these days. When we did cross paths, at the mailboxes or local supermarket, she would turn abruptly in the opposite direction. I couldn't bring myself to feel victorious about her downfall. There was something sad about watching someone so invested in control lose it so completely. But life in Desert Palms had never been better. My backyard had become an unofficial neighborhood gathering spot. The kids would finish homework together at the patio table while parents chatted over coffee or evening beers. Simple, neighborly moments that had been stifled under Karen's reign flourished in the new atmosphere. On a perfect Saturday in late summer, I floated lazily on my back in the pool, the Arizona sky a flawless blue overhead. Emma and Tyler were having lunch inside with friends, their voices drifting out through the open patio door. The sound of a lawnmower hummed somewhere down the street. "Room for one more?" I looked up to see Lisa standing at the pool's edge, holding out a cold beer. "Always," I replied, swimming to the side to accept the drink. "Thanks." She kicked off her sandals and sat at the edge, dipping her feet in the water. "I saw Karen packing her car this morning. Looks like the rumors are true, she's moving." "Really?" "She never put the house on the market." Lisa shrugged. "Frank says she sold it privately to her sister. Apparently, she's moving to some golf community in Florida. Fresh start, I mused. Fresh territory to terrorize, Lisa corrected with a smirk. We both laughed, but there was a note of sympathy in it. Karen had built her identity around controlling our little corner of the world, only to see it slip through her fingers because she couldn't follow her own rules. You know, Lisa said after a thoughtful pause, there's an opening on the architectural review committee now. Frank thinks you'd be perfect for it. I nearly choked on my beer. Me? After all this? Especially after all this. You know the rules, you're fair, and you stood up for what was right. That's exactly what we need. I floated for a moment, considering. I'll think about it. The back door burst open as Tyler and his friends raced out, cannonballing into the pool with gleeful disregard for the adults in their path. Water splashed everywhere, soaking Lisa and sending my beer bottle bobbing away. Tyler. I sputtered. Watch where you're jumping, buddy. But I was laughing too hard to sound stern. So was Lisa, pushing wet hair from her face. Dad. Emma called from the doorway. Doug and Mrs. Patel are here with ice cream sandwiches. They want to know if they can join the pool party. I waved them in. The more the merrier. As more neighbors filtered in, some with food, others with drinks, all with smiles, I reflected on the strange journey of the past few months. All I had wanted was a pool for my kids, a small piece of happiness in our new life. I never expected it would lead to dismantling a petty dictatorship and helping build a real community in its place. You know what's funny? Doug said, settling into a lawn chair beside the pool. Karen spent years making everyone miserable over every little rule, and in the end, she couldn't even follow the most basic ones herself. Karma has a way of coming full circle, Mrs. Patel agreed wisely, passing around homemade samosas. I raised my rescued beer bottle in a toast. To desert palms, may the only thing that overflows be our pools, not our violation notices. Laughter rippled across the yard, as warm and welcome as the Arizona sunshine. In the distance, I could just make out Karen's house, the windows now empty, the front yard bare where her prized rosebushes had been dug up and taken away. All I had wanted was a pool for my kids. I didn't think I'd end up draining Karen's power too. But as I looked around at the happy faces of my neighbors, now friends, I couldn't help but think it was the best unexpected outcome I could have hoped for.